No, I ain't gonna fight it, His Spirit is taking me there. I cannot doubt that love is in the air. Surrender my will to the one who's calling my name. They tell me once your heart's there, you'll never be the same.
It's not too often I get a chance to talk about my mother. But she used to have these expressions that came from being a truck stop waitress. Which I'm sure that already warns you ahead of time of what's going to be said. But one of my interpretations of one of the things she said was, and I'll put my spin on it so it's a little more polite, and she was a Christian, but she would still be a little blunt. But she used to say that a jerk is still a jerk, even if it is a Christian. And what she meant by that, or what we want to discuss by that, is that just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're not an idiot or a fool or stupid or dumb. I mean, to put it bluntly. So, though we don't call people idiot, stupid, fool, or dumb, we don't deny the fact that just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you can get away with not changing the insides to reflect what should be on the outside. Because what we see on the outside, most of us, is more of an ungodly person than a godly person. And that's kind of what Tozer was warning us today in his devotional teaching, is that we ought to recognize that the outward manifestation of the things that are out here are passing away. You know, the lust thereof, the lust of the world, the lust of the eye, the pride of life, the flesh, and all that is passing away. So what's inside is what's going to last. Your spirit, your soul, so to speak. What you're putting inside you maybe is corrupting what's good inside you. So maybe it's time to evaluate what's inside so that you can change what's on the outside. Effective prayer, letting all our pretenses go. Even so you also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Matthew 23:28. The basic artificiality of civilized human beings is hard to shake off. It gets into our very blood and conditions our thoughts, attitudes, and relationships much more seriously than we imagine. The desire to make a good impression has become one of the most powerful of all the factors determining human conduct. That gracious and scriptural social lubricant called courtesy has in our times degenerated into a completely false and phony etiquette that hides the true man under a shammery surface as thin as the oil slick on a quiet pond. The only time some persons expose their real self is when they get mad. Wow. Boy, talk about opening up a can of worms. I loved, in my early life, God taking me from Southern California to Oregon, because in Southern California we learned how to be superficial. I mean, everybody does, whether it be Hollywood or OC or Orange County or whatever it is. You learn how to be superficial, how to say the right things, you know, wear the right clothes, do the right thing, you know, in order to make the sale or to make the connection, to accomplish what you wanted done, to get what you wanted when you needed it, or to network with someone. You know, there's all kinds of manipulative ways that people are talking about the superficial, surface person, because you're not being real about who you are. Me, I learned a long time ago that I could be superficial. I learned very early on in my Christian experience how superficial I was, and I walked away from it. I decided literally to give up all my Christianity and all my worldliness and all my carnality, because I'd gotten into backsliding and I'd gotten into kind of like sales job where I was making lots of money and had lots of friends, you know, and I had nice car, you know, the Mod Squad car, and I had all these things that I'd accumulated, and I walked away from it because I looked in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw. I mean, a real mirror. I looked at it and I said, who are you? You know, I knew that I could change my image to be whoever I needed to be to make the sale. And I didn't like that. And I learned how not to do that after a while, because my family had been raised up in sarcasm and very good at cutting each other down. So we also learned how to have the superficial protectionism, you know, where we protected our personality. So we always had this outward, you know, kind of person that we put out here. A lot of times you see that in pastors in some ways, or you see that in people in some ways, that their public persona is not their private persona. You know, they're not exactly the same, you know. I'm a little bit nervous or leery sometimes when I have this person on the internet that tells me, well, it's obvious that you love Jesus because you light up when you talk about him. Well, that almost sounds like, well, what are you like other times? Well, I'm a jerk. A jerk is a jerk, and most men are jerks. No, but I love to talk about Jesus because that lights me up. But, you know, I don't put on a new persona, you know, in order to record videos. If anything, that's why I put the videos on, so that you don't think I'm only a jerk because of something you read on the internet. Because you see, a lot of times people will read something that I posted on the internet and they'll think, man, that guy's a jerk. You know, he's full of pride or he's full of ego. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about the post. I said, and I have to explain it to him. I said, look, I understand that your education level may not have gotten to a certain place where, you know, you're used to everybody agreeing with you and saying, oh yes, you're right, and by the way, let me explain to you how come you're right, and then try to steer you in some way. Instead of someone just saying, no, you're wrong. I'm sorry, the Bible does not say that. This is what the Bible says. Now, you can go that way if you want to, but if you do, these are the consequences of your actions. So you can be very realistic about it and up front. But sometimes people don't catch that caring attitude from you inside, no matter what words you choose, because they are snap decision making and snap reactionary. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, I get this misconstrued idea of who I am. So I tell them bluntly, I said, look, if you think I'm some kind of like egotist or some kind of, you know, full of pride thing, please watch a VidDevo. I'll tell you the truth. I said, give me 5 minutes and I'm a sinner just like you are. I'll go out and blow it big time. But thank God there's Jesus to keep me from blowing it, because I'll ask him, Lord, do you want me to blow it or do you want me to go this way? You know, it's like, please God, stop me from jumping into that, because I'll get all dirty and muddy. You know, and we're all that way. But the thing that changed inside me was that God came inside and began to rearrange my inners, you know, and made me into the person that I am on the outside. So what you see is what you get. You know, sometimes I, you know, cut my hair off, you know, just so I could be back to, you know, not worried about the outward things. Sometimes I grow it long. Sometimes I put on a beard. Sometimes a goatee. Sometimes I wear a suit and tie. Sometimes I do the rap thing, you know. Sometimes I put on a sweatshirt. Sometimes I, you know, run around in cutoffs, you know, and just, you know, I'd run around without my shirt on, except for I think some of you would overreact. No, we're not running around naked. Sorry, we're not in the garden yet. But give me the garden. No, I'm kidding. But the point is that God sees us naked. He sees us on our inside, while we put on these airs on the outside. And Tozer's warning about that there is, in every Christian, is want to present yourself in a better way. Kind of like, do you get dressed up for Sunday morning? You know, it's like, do you get all cleaned up? You know, and usually that's what irritates most people, and why they get in a fight on Sunday mornings, because they're getting all cleaned up and they really don't want to. Me, I don't want to shave, so I'll go to church just unshaven or whatever, you know. I don't care. I'm not going there to be seen of men. I'm going there to be seen of God, you know, and God can see me before I went there, so I already know that. But when I'm meeting with other people too, I don't always listen to what Tozer says, because I recognize that people are superficial and they deal on a superficial level. So sometimes I give a little on that, and I do present a little bit of what makes them comfortable. For instance, like, I wouldn't put on a, you know, well, okay, if I was going to Orthodox synagogue, I would put on a kippah, you know, I'd put on my kippah, you know, I'd go and daven, you know, and I'd bring my siddur, you know, and pray. Or if I was going to, you know, a Catholic church, you know, yeah, I'd probably, you know, do, you know, God is always through the Son, you know, pray to make the signs of the cross, you know, and do a certain amount of it. I don't think I'll go to confessional, because I don't know what I know what they do in there, and I know how to do it. But I try to figure out, well, which side am I supposed to be sitting on? Do I play the priest side or not? Just kidding, because we all be made priests. But the point is that to a certain amount, I adjust for becoming all things to all men, lest by any means some might be saved. So I adjust to that, but I don't compromise my inside. In other words, I'm not some kind of jerk just putting on the nice guy on the outside. And that's what we need to be careful of. Because I meet a lot of jerks. I mean, bluntly, I just dealt with one, coming out of my previous living arrangements. And I went out of my way to protect his reputation, to keep no aggravation between us, to go way laying down my life so that I could talk to him, so that there would be peace between us, so that there would be no confrontation. And yet I know what was on the inside, because sometimes you get a word of knowledge, word of wisdom, or you just see it manifested by somebody blowing it, big time. And that's one thing that you don't want to do. You don't want to let outward things affect the inward person. You want to let God work on who you are inside, so that He makes you the same way on the outside that you are on the inside. And that's what Tozer was talking about. That's what he's trying to bring out in that teaching, that the desire to make a good impression has become one of the most powerful of all factors. Everyone wants to put a good front forward, a good face on an issue. And sometimes you can't. You have to deal up front with the reality of what the facts are. Sometimes you have to have what's called, and I used to study this book, it was called Care Confrontation. And it was presenting information in a caring way that confronts every issue of the day directly, immediately, without having to back away from it. But that if you presented it in a certain means, with coming around or coming alongside or coming underneath or underpining or undergirding or caring in the way that you presented your facial expressions or your words, or you hug someone or you help them, then in Care Confrontation you were able to bring resolution to the person, so that you could open them up to allow them conversation to begin to explain where they're coming from. Because once they begin to talk, then you see that this flood of feeling comes out, and their soul, like a dam that's been held back with waters, suddenly is burst, and then you can minister to them in a very intimate way. And I learned that in counseling a long time ago. I mean, it was a great study, and I remember, I don't even know where the book is now, but I remember it was called Care Confrontation, and it was just a dynamic book, that was just full of wisdom and sharing in how to do that. But there's also that realization that you have to have the right attitude inside in the first place. You have to want to care about that person. Because if you don't care, and you're trying to put on a surface game of it, it'll show. Because people will see through you. With this perverted courtesy determining almost everything men and women say and do in human society, it is not surprising that it should be hard to be completely honest in our relationship with God. It carries over as a kind of mental reflex and is present without our being aware of it. One of the reasons why I say so often that God sees you when you're pooping is because He does. He knows when you're pooping. Was it a 1 or a 2? He sees it. He knows. The point being is that God is aware of all things at all times, and He sees all things. So for us to hide who we are, irregardless of how we feel, is a poor self-image, really. Is that in one of the principles of life that I'm teaching on a different video series, we talk about self-image, how if you don't understand your own poor self-image and you have a wrong image of God, then you don't come to God honestly. You come to Him with kind of like he and haw, trying to explain why you did this or why you did that, or how, it wasn't your fault, or, maybe it was that other person, and, if you'd have done it a different way. All the ifs, ands, or buts, which don't amount to anything when it comes to God, because God already says, look, you're guilty. That's it. Now, you want to get cleaned up or not? When I deal with people, the same thing is true. People come to me all the time, they tell me something, I look right through it and I say, well, did you love your brother? Did you ask Jesus? I mean, there's only like 3 questions you only got to ask, I mean, First, there's 3 questions, about what you're affecting: the Father, the Son, and people around you. After that, then it's like, well, are you reading your Bible? Are you fellowshipping? And are you doing what he said? That's about it. There's 7 questions you could ask and wipe out all of counseling. But the bottom line is that when you don't want to be honest with God, when you haven't put on that, they call it the truth, belt of truth, then you get caught with your pants down, because sooner or later your sin finds you out, or your bad attitude, or your bad actions, or your insides become obvious on the outsides. Because Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. So I took that literal in everything. When I hear someone talking, I know what kind of person they are. If they have no discipline over their tongue, and they're just shooting off their mouth saying all kinds of manners of cuss words, or full of political talk, or full of carnal talk, or full of football talk, or full of this talk, that talk, or the other talk, I know what their heart's full of, because that's what Jesus said. Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. So if I want to be good, or if I want to be godly on the inside, then I have to fill my heart with something so it comes on the outside. You see? You got to put in before you can put out. That's the way it works. Spiritual economy. Put in. Study to show thyself approved, workman not of shine. Faith comes by hearing, by the word of God. Listen, read, study, put it in your head, put it in your heart, put it in your mind, put it in your soul, put it in your being, put it here, put it there, put it where you know. And then when you got it inside, it comes out on the outside. People tell me all the time, they go, well, I just don't know what to say. And I'm thinking, well, if you were filled up inside, you'd know what to say. Fill it up. The reason why I can't stop talking is because I studied so much. It was like it was bursting out of me. It was like exploding out here, there, and everywhere. I used to tell people, look, I can't study anymore, because you know what? I got to go teach or do something, because it's like, man, it's just too much inside. My brain's overloaded. And at one point in time it was, Now I need to study more, The more you give out, the more you need in. The more that goes in, the more it goes out. The more that you put in, the more that you put out. So if you want to see what kind of person a person is, all you got to do is watch what comes out. Their mouth, their actions, their deeds, their words. Literally. And if you want to program it, well, then you could put some superficial, words there, but it really won't count, because you'll see how even in speaking they'll trip themselves up in those words. So Tozer's teaching really is kind of two-pronged. It's on the one hand how superficial Christians are, and how they put on this, coquettishness, this kind of like mannerisms of being, oh, I'm so glad to see you. How are you this morning? And you know what? When people used to ask me at church, how you doing? I said, sucks. I said, man, I hate Sunday morning. I hate going to church on Sunday morning. I said, I don't mind working behind the scenes, but I really can't stand going to church when everybody's acting so nice and friendly, and they really feel like cacas, and they don't really want to get together with God, and they just come because they're going to hear the music, and then it's going to wind them up, and they're going to study it, and then they feel like, they're okay, and then when they walk away, they go out of here righteous, and then they feel holy, and then they go back to doing the same thing that they were doing, Monday through Friday. And the person looks at me like, and they never asked me again. Okay, maybe that was my younger days. But, that's kind of the thing. Are you truthful when someone asks you how you feel? I'll say, okay, not bad. Or I'll say, great. I say, I'm praising the Lord, man. I'm counting it all joy, because I fell into diverse trials and tribulations, and man, I am really going through it, and it sucks. But you know what? I'm going to count it all joy, and I'm going to rejoice in it, because this is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice behind it. And because there's trial and tribulation, I know that I can count it all joy, because He's going to work it out in His own way. So the reason that I brought it to you is because that way you would be a witness to that testimony which I'm giving to you, so that you can see how well I'm going to go through this trial and tribulation, because I'm counting it all joy, and you can tell by the evidence on my face that I'm enjoying it. We talked like that. We were Jesus freaks. We blessed our socks off with each talking to each other that way. It was so much fun. We were like, lost your job? Cool. Dig it. God is just working with you. Man, isn't that great? What can I say? That's the way I was learned and taught. So if you would teach yourself and learned from the wisdom of God that says that out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks, and Tozer says about the superficiality of Christianity today, then you would recognize that you can tell a lot about where people are coming from, and you can tell a lot about yourself by what you talk the most about. Because it used to be that, what you spent the most time with was your idol, and that used to be kind of like everybody do that one. And now people don't really care because they'll spend that much time on everything else anyways and still call it their idol. And they're happy with that. Okay. But now people don't realize even their own mouth condemns them. And that's what Jesus said. Your own words would condemn you. Or they would justify you. Let that be something to think about for a long time, for the next long time. And keep thinking about it. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So you may be condemning yourself without realizing it, or proving that you do or don't have a relationship with God by your own speaking and revealing whether or not God is in you or God is without you. Jesus said it himself in the book of Revelation. He addressed a church, and he didn't yell at them. He told them what was wrong with them. He told them what was right. He told them that, yes, they were Christians, and they were a Christian church. But he said interesting words to Christians only, and not to non-Christians. He said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and sup with him and he with me." Jesus spoke that to the Christian. Where are you at today? Where's your heart at? What's it full of? What are you talking about more than anything else in your day? Where are you coming from? What's your rap? What's your reputation like? What are you known for? Not if there's enough evidence to convict you of being a Christian, but is there enough of Jesus in you that it comes out from you in all of your life? Nevertheless, it is an attitude extremely hateful to God. Christ detested it and condemned it without mercy when he found it among the Pharisees. The artless little child is still the divine model for all of us. Prayer will increase in power and reality as we repudiate all pretense and learn to be utterly honest before God as well as before man. If you can admit your sin, if you can confess your sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. But if you can admit that you're a sinner, then you are humble. If you can just admit the reality of who you are in needful of grace and just share with what you've learned according to the mercy you've been given, then you're moving in the right direction, because then God can use you. But you see, God doesn't need the righteous who are already fixed, who say they need to point out the faults of others and spew out what they keep spewing. Or God doesn't need someone to tell us what is going on in the world, because he already knows what's going on in the world. And everyone does. What God needs is the person who's real. And what every unborn-again Christian wants is a Christian that is real, meaning that they do have Jesus in them. They are real about their own faults. They're willing to say, I'm not perfect. I'm struggling just like you are, but I've got a direction and I've got someone helping me. I've got a difference in me that changes me, and someday I will be obvious by that change, because though you may not see it, there's something in me that's changing me day by day, and it's rearranging my priorities and attitudes and actions by making someone new inside that one day will shine like a light on the outside. And that person is you.